A human highlight reel, a generational talent, and some would even go as far as saying the most electric college football player of all time. Reggie Bush is one of the best known players in college football history, displaying flashes of greatness as a Trojan in 2005 and then in the NFL. His rise was without some controversies and question marks along the way in 2006 when adversity struck. And despite these treacherous accusations, he continued to be a force to be reckoned with, setting the stage for his rise and story to unravel in the NFL. This is the story of Reggie Bush. Reggie Bush attended Helix High School in La Mesa, California, where he played ball with the first overall pick of the 2005 draft, Alex Smith. And even as a young high schooler, his own teammate Alex Smith just described Reggie as a man among boys, as a measly 15-year-old.
I mean, he was such a better player. Speed, agility, change of direction, vision than anybody else out there. Even as a 15-year-old, I remember people constantly, he's gonna win the Heisman one day.
Fast forward to 2004, Smith and Bush were later finalists for the Heisman, marking it as the first time a high school had two finalists at the same ceremony. Oh, and did I mention while being a 5-star recruit on the football field, he was also a track star? His exceptional skills attracted attention from almost every college football program. And surprisingly, although USC wasn't as dominant as it had used to be, new head coach Pete Carroll had managed to use the flashiness and celebrities around LA to draw on highly sought after recruits like Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart.
University of Southern California.
And in 2003, when Matt Leinart stepped on the field with him, the USC dynasty was shaping up to be one for the ages. And as a freshman, he quickly proved that he was a difference maker. He racked up 1,331 all-purpose yards, which as a freshman was a record at the school. And by the end of that season, he was a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. But Bush didn't win it that season. In 2004, during his sophomore campaign, the highlight reels were insane of what he could do. He rushed 143 times for 908 yards and 6 touchdowns. And on top of that, he had 43 receptions for 509 yards and 7 more touchdowns. But again, that's not all. He returned kicks for an additional 376 yards and with 2 more touchdowns, ending the season with 2,330 total yards. But in 2005, in his junior year and final season at USC, the things that USC and Reggie Bush did was something that would captivate the entire sports world. I mean, in 2005, where do we even begin? Everyone on the USC team was eating. Bush dominated. Matt Leinart dominated. Hell, even Landale White dominated as a 1-2 combo in the backfield with Reggie. The defense dominated. The Bush push that sent Notre Dame home crying, and they were back to beating their crosstown rival in UCLA. And in November of that year also, Reggie Bush put on one of the greatest highlight reels that anyone had ever seen against Fresno State, leaving everybody's jaw on the floor after he did this.
Reggie Bush right up the middle, hits the outside, he's at the 30, it's another foot race, cuts it back to the 20, comes back to the near side of the field, he's gonna go, it's gonna be another USC touchdown.
Bush finished with 200 carries for 1,740 yards on the ground, alongside 39 receptions for 481 yards, with 18 touchdowns combined. Tack on an extra couple hundred yards racked up on punt returns and add 500 yards on kickoff returns. He was flat out one of the greatest running backs in college football history and was completely decimating his opponents on a weekly basis. I mean, hell, if you wanted a quick million views on YouTube at the time, all you had to do was go find some Reggie Bush highlights and post them and you'd blow up. He was the clear-cut winner of the Heisman Trophy at the end of the season, beating out his fellow teammate Matt Leinart and Vince Young in the Heisman voting. And I mean, it wasn't even close.
Reggie Bush received 784 first place votes. This was a Heisman landslide.
Along with that, he was the Associated Press College Football Player of the Year. So what's left, you ask? A national championship, and there was one man standing between USC and that national title. And Vince Young proceeded to put together one of the most magical and greatest national title wins of all time, ending USC's 35-game win streak they had brought into that game and put UT on top. And after the heartbreaking loss, he didn't want to stick around at USC and opted to forego his senior season to enter the NFL draft. Bush was projected to go #1 overall to the Houston Texans, given his talent and his combine performance. performance.
Only spoke to Houston, that was it. So everything I'm thinking is, I'm going to Houston. I'm looking for property down there already. And then the night before, we find out on ESPN that Mario Williams is going first on the ticker.
But he didn't have to sit very long after that to receive the call that every college athlete dreams of.
Call Sean Payton and is like, hey, don't draft us. We're not coming. Don't draft us, right? And Sean's like, this verbatim, you, I'm drafting Reggie Bush, and hung the phone up.
And everything was lining up for Bush to continue his dominance in the NFL, alongside his newly acquired Drew Brees and rebuilding Saints team. But there was one blaring red flag about Reggie Bush that stood out. Days prior to the draft, Yahoo Sports reported possible financial benefits that Bush and his family may have received during his time at the school. It was reported that Bush's parents lived rent-free in a house that was owned by a marketing agent, Michael Michaels. So with all this information coming out, the Pac-10 and the NCAA said they would begin to investigate Bush after this report. But that didn't matter. The new Saint was living large, and despite the accusations, every fan was in love with their new rookie running back. In his rookie season in New Orleans, while the city was still recovering from the devastating Hurricane Katrina, Bush was insanely productive behind Brees and Sean Payton together. In the first game he played, he tallied up 141 total yards and was proving to be not only a solid runner out of the backfield, but a dual threat out of the backfield alongside his counterpart, Deuce McAllister, proving to fans that he'd be more and more involved, and his electricity would transfer from the college field to the NFL just fine. Surprisingly, New Orleans kept stacking up some wins. Although Bush hadn't scored a touchdown, at the midway point of the season, things would change as he continued to get more playing time. And in the first game of December, he scored 4 touchdowns and turned it up from there. He later on helped the team clinch the number 2 seed in the conference and make the playoffs. They beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC divisional round, despite taking one of the hardest hits everybody has ever seen in their life, but later lost to the Chicago Bears in the NFC Championship game. By the end of the year, he had 155 carries for 565 yards, adding on 88 receptions for 742 yards and a combined 8 touchdowns. And despite the accusations he was facing from the NCAA back in September of 2006, he was hoping his 2007 season would provide some closure and promise. But it didn't exactly go as planned for him or the Saints. They were crushed in the season opener, and it didn't get much better than that. To make matters worse, the star running back suffered a partially torn ligament in his knee, but despite the team's setbacks and his own injury, Bush still had 157 carries for 581 yards and 4 touchdowns in the games he did play, both of which were more than his previous season's total. And again, more and more accusations and information of his time at USC were coming about. At the time, sports agent Lloyd Blake sued Bush and his parents in an effort to recoup nearly $292,000 in cash and gifts the family allegedly accepted from him during Bush's final 2 seasons at USC. They had gotten all the information they had wanted on their golden boy, even though they knew that every star athlete was being paid some type of amount of money across the nation, or being helped in some fashion. They had finally caught somebody cheating and would make sure that he would pay. Hell, some people were even saying, including my 10-year-old self at the time, were wondering, would USC get the death penalty? But we wouldn't hear from the NCAA for another 3 years until 2010. In his 4th season, it was almost seeming like different years, same Reggie Bush, resting from more injuries and having a limited snap count. And due to all of this, he had career lows across the board, but he did show up when it mattered. He played throughout the postseason in New Orleans and helped them big time in the Super Bowl against the Colts. And now was he not only a Heisman Trophy winner and a national icon, he was a Super Bowl champion. But after the big Super Bowl victory, everything changed and Bush wouldn't be able to enjoy this victory very long.
Reggie Bush could become the first player in the 75-year history of the Heisman Trophy to lose that award. Yahoo Sports is reporting that the Heisman Trophy Trust is expected to strip the running back of the top award by the end of the month.
You see, Bush was clouded with all the controversy due to his Heisman being taken away by the NCAA over the USC-related matter, something still controversial to this day.
I'd still have the Heisman. I would not have given it back. I don't care what anybody says. That's my Heisman Trophy. I earned it. Reggie Bush did not cheat. He didn't take performance-enhancing drugs. He didn't go on the field and cheat in any way.
The NCAA had finally completed its investigation into USC, which included started looking into allegations against Bush and a former USC men's basketball player, OJ Mayo. And just so coincidentally, that same day, Pete Carroll resigned from his position to take the head coaching job with the Seattle Seahawks, which made this whole thing look even worse. The NCAA would hand down sanctions and USC would have to vacate their last 2 wins of the 2004 season and the entire 2005 season, while also being banned from bowl games in 2010 and 2011. They also forced USC to dissociate from Reggie Bush, and on September 14th, Reggie Bush would do something that had never been done before. Bush announced in a statement that he would voluntarily return his Heisman Trophy to the Heisman Trust, becoming the first player to ever do so. And since that day, the Heisman Trust has just left that award vacant for 2005. Oh, and yeah, you guessed it. In his 2010 season, it was full of more injuries. This time, a broken bone in his leg in the second game of the year and returned to minimal production. All in all, it just wasn't pretty. And the Saints knew that with Bush diminishing and him not being nearly as productive as they had wished, the Saints traded him to the Miami Dolphins. And while in Miami, he almost had a slight resurgence in his career in the 2 years that he spent there. In 2011, the Dolphins started the season 0-7, but had some good games towards the end of the year. Regardless of the team's success though, Bush played a pivotal role in the offense. He took a whopping 216 carries and exceeded 1,086 rushing yards with 6 touchdowns. He also had 43 receptions for 296 yards and another touchdown. It was his best rushing season of his career, and he had made the most out of a bad situation in Miami. And again, in his second year with the Dolphins in 2012, he started the season out with a 26 carry, 172-yard rushing performance against the Oakland Raiders. He was AFC Offensive Player that week with ease, and it was a key game for the rest of his season. Finishing with a near identical season to his past campaign with Miami, it was still one of his most productive rushing years. And in a shocking turn of events, instead of re-signing, he opted to head into free agency and see his options. After thinking through his options, the 28-year-old former USC superstar chose to sign with the Detroit Lions on a 4-year deal in 2013. The franchise saw his potential and wanted to use him as a 3-down back straight away. He rushed for over 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. He also had 54 receptions for 506 yards and 3 more touchdowns. Simply put, he was balling like he was back in SoCal. He was one of the best running backs in the game and got rated 85th by his NFL peers on the top 100 list. In 2014, fellow running back Joique Bell started getting more of the lion's share of the carries, and it damaged Bush's numbers. It ended up being one of his worst seasons dating back to the 4th year of his career when he played just 8 games. And to make matters worse, he was cut by the team and signed to the San Francisco 49ers in 2015. As a now 30-year-old, he played just 5 games and he really just had 8 carries for 28 yards, but it was clear that there wasn't a spot for him in San Francisco. This led to him being bounced to the Buffalo Bills as a backup running back the following season, where he appeared in 12 games but had 12 carries for -3 yards on the season. Yes, you heard that correctly, -3 yards on the season. He later retired from the league, but ended his career with overall good numbers. And at the end of the day, it always felt like Reggie Bush could have had a better career than the one he had, even though he was a Super Bowl champion and an effective back for multiple seasons. But while being caught in the midst of one of the most notable NCAA scandals of all time and having to give back his Heisman, many others, including myself, believe he earned that award and should have kept it because his performance on the field at USC was unlike anything we had ever seen before. And the money didn't help him play better each and every Saturday. He was just that much better than anyone else in 2005, leading him to be one of the most electric college football players we had ever seen take the field.